In the Wild West of 1880, death was common and life was cheap. But sometimes, in that lawless land where guns spoke louder than words, an act of mercy could change everything. Please support our small channel with your subscription. Your support motivates us to create more Wild West stories. Thank you. The November wind of 1883 howled through Silver Ridge like a wounded coyote, rattling the loose boards of Ed Cartwright, this undertaking parlor. The old man had seen death in all its forms during his 20 years in the business, but tonight felt different. Two strangers in black dusters had arrived just after sunset, their faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats, carrying a body wrapped in coarse burlap. "Accident," one muttered, tossing a leather pouch heavy with coins onto Ed's workbench. "No funeral, no questions. Plan her before dawn." The wagon wheels creaked into the darkness before Ed could respond. He stood alone with the body, oil lamp casting dancing shadows across the walls adorned with coffin advertisements and memorial photographs. Something about this delivery troubled him deeply. As he prepared the simple pine coffin, Ed noticed the body seemed unusually warm through the burlap. His weathered hands, steady from years of preparing the dead, trembled slightly as he unwrapped the covering. A young woman, his face emerged, perhaps 25 years old, with auburn hair matted against pale skin. But then he saw it, the faintest rise and fall of her chest. "Mother of Mercy," Ed whispered, pressing his ear to her chest. A heartbeat, weak but unmistakable, pulsed against his cheek. This woman was alive. Ed's mind raced. Those men had paid for a burial, not a murder. But if he revealed she lived, they would surely return to finish their dark work. The choice was clear. He would not be party to such evil. Wrapping the woman in wool blankets from his storage room, Ed carried her through the back door to his modest cabin on the edge of town. The weight of her unconscious form reminded him of carrying his own daughter years ago, before the cholera took her. He laid the stranger on his bed and stoked the iron stove until the room glowed with warmth. All through that long night, Ed kept vigil. He spooned small amounts of whiskey between her lips, hoping the spirits would warm her blood. Her breathing remained shallow but steady. Whatever had been done to her, poison, perhaps, or some sleeping draught, had brought her to the very threshold of death. As dawn broke over the desert mountains, painting the sky crimson and gold, the woman's eyelids fluttered. Ed Cartwright, who had prepared hundreds for their final rest, had just helped one return from that dark journey. 2 days passed before the woman opened her eyes fully. Ed had barely left her side, spooning broth between her lips and keeping the fire burning despite the dwindling woodpile. Young Billy, the orphan boy who helped around the funeral parlor for meals and a place to sleep, proved invaluable during this time. The 12-year-old fetched water from the well and kept watch while Ed caught brief moments of rest. "Where am I?" The woman's voice came as a hoarse whisper, her green eyes focusing with difficulty on the rough-hewn ceiling beams. Ed leaned forward from his chair, relief flooding through him. "You are safe, miss. This is my home outside Silver Ridge. You were brought to me for burial, but the Lord had other plans." Fear flashed across her features as memory returned. Her hands flew to her throat, fingers searching for something that was not there. They tried to. She could not finish the sentence. "Easy now," Ed soothed, offering her a tin cup of water. "Whatever happened is past. You are among friends here." Billy peered around the doorframe, his freckled face bright with curiosity. "She is awake, Mr. Ed. I told you she would make it. I prayed real hard, just like you taught me." The woman managed a weak smile at the boy. Over the following days, as her strength slowly returned, she remained guarded about her identity. When Ed offered her charcoal and paper to write her name, she hesitated before scratching "Clara" on the wall, then immediately rubbed it out with her palm as though even that revelation was too dangerous. "I have already fought for my life once," she said one evening as they sat by the stove, Billy whittling a piece of pine while Ed cleaned his old Navy Colt. "And I lost. That is why I am here." Ed studied her face in the firelight. Despite her ordeal, there was steel in her spine, a determination that reminded him of the frontier women who had survived Indian raids and harsh winters. "Sometimes losing a battle does not mean losing the war," he said quietly. She turned to stare into the flames. "They will come looking. When they learn I am not in the ground where they put me, they will come." Her voice carried certainty, not fear. Ed checked the loads in his revolver cylinder. "Then we had best be ready when they do." The woman who called herself Clara watched this gesture with approval. Whatever her past, Whatever had brought her to the edge of death, she was not ready to surrender to it. And neither was Ed Cartwright, who had spent too many years among the dead to turn away from protecting the living. One morning, while Ed and Billy were out gathering firewood, Clara found herself alone in the cabin. Her strength had returned enough to move about, and curiosity drew her to Ed's desk where he kept his undertaking records. Her fingers trembled as she opened the leather-bound ledger, scanning the entries until she found what she dreaded to see. There it was, written in Ed's careful script: Clara Weston, wife of deceased rancher Thomas Weston. Buried at Red Rock Canyon, November 3rd, 1883. The date was a week past. According to this record, she was already dead and buried. When Ed returned, he found her sitting at the table, the ledger open before her. Tears streaked her dust-stained cheeks. "Now you know who I am," she said simply. Ed set down his armload of wood and took the chair across from her. Billy, sensing the gravity of the moment, busied himself stoking the stove. "I figured you were somebody important when those men paid triple my usual fee," Ed said. "But knowing your name changes nothing. You are still under my protection." Clara. His story spilled out then, like water through a broken dam. Her uncle had arranged her marriage to Thomas Weston, a wealthy but sickly rancher with no heirs. The marriage had been businesslike but not unkind. Thomas had treated her with respect, even growing fond of her in his final months. Before he died, Thomas changed his will, Clara explained, her voice growing stronger with each word. "He left everything to me: the Golden Horseshoe Ranch, the cattle, the water rights. That ranch has the best water in 3 counties, worth more than gold in this drought-plagued land." Ed nodded slowly, understanding dawning. Water rights meant power in the desert territories. Wars had been fought over less. Thomas, his younger brother Jacob, expected to inherit, Clara continued. "He called me an obstacle to be removed. One night, after Thomas had been in the ground barely a month, Jacob came to the house with his men. They forced something down my throat, a bitter liquid that made the world go dark. When I tried to fight, Jacob said I was already dead, that nobody would question a young widow dying of grief." Billy had stopped his whittling, his young face pale with anger. "That is not right, Miss Clara. That is murder." "Attempted murder," Ed corrected grimly. "Though if we do not act carefully, Jacob Weston may yet finish what he started." Clara stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the desert landscape. The deed in will are lodged with a lawyer in Dodge City. Thomas made sure of that. Bless him. He did not trust his brother any more than I did. But papers mean nothing if I am not alive to claim them. Ed joined her at the window. In the distance, dust devils danced across the sage-covered plains. "Then we need to make sure you stay alive, Miss Clara. And we need to let the right people know that Jacob Weston tried to bury you breathing." Ed saddled his old mare before dawn and rode into Silver Ridge, leaving Clara in Billy's care. The boy had proven himself trustworthy, and Ed had taught him to load and fire the shotgun kept above the door. Clara herself had revealed a surprising familiarity with firearms, courtesy of Thomas, his patient instruction during their brief marriage. The town was already stirring as Ed tied his horse outside Murphy's general store. He needed supplies, but more importantly, information. The saloon would not open for hours, but Murphy's attracted all the early morning gossip. "Ed Cartwright," Murphy called out from behind his counter. "Have not seen you in town for a week. Thought maybe you had joined your customers." Ed forced a chuckle while selecting coffee and ammunition. "Takes more than winter cold to put me under, Murphy." Speaking of being put under, Murphy leaned in conspiratorially. "Did you hear about the Weston woman? Thomas, this young widow, died of grief, they say. Brain fever from mourning. Jacob Weston had to bury her quick-like to prevent contagion." Ed kept his expression neutral. "Shame. She seemed a sturdy sort when I met her at Thomas's funeral." "That is what I thought too," Murphy agreed. "But Jacob says she went strange after Thomas died. Refused to eat, talked to shadows. Better she is at peace now, though Jacob is torn up about it. Taking it real hard, having to manage the Golden Horseshoe all alone now." Ed paid for his goods and left, but not before noticing 2 of Jacob Weston, his ranch hands, lounging across the street, watching everyone who came and went. The word was out, then. Jacob was keeping eyes on the town. On the ride back, Ed took a circuitous route, doubling back twice to ensure he was not followed. As he crested the ridge above his cabin, his blood ran cold. Fresh horse tracks circled his property, and the door to his tool shed hung open. Someone had been there, He found Clara and Billy safe but shaken. They had hidden in the root cellar when they heard horses approaching. The riders had circled the cabin several times before one dismounted to search the shed. "They know someone is here," Clara said, checking the loads in Ed's spare revolver with practiced ease. "Jacob is not stupid. He will put together the pieces soon enough." That night, Ed barely slept. Every coyote howl, every whisper of wind, might herald the arrival of Jacob's men. At dawn, he was proven right. The acrid smell of smoke woke him. The small stable where he kept his mare was ablaze, flames licking at the dry timber. As Ed and Billy fought the fire with buckets of sand, Sheriff Morrison appeared on the ridge, badge glinting in the firelight. He made no move to help, simply watched until the structure collapsed into embers. "Dangerous thing, fire," the sheriff called down. "A man who harbors fugitives might find his whole world burning." "You hear me, Cartwright?" Ed stood straight, soot-blackened and defiant. "I hear you, Morrison, and I know who pays your salary." The next morning, Clara emerged from the cabin transformed. She had washed the soot from her hair and donned one of Ed's clean shirts, tucked into a pair of Billy's outgrown trousers. Her eyes blazed with determination. "No more hiding," she declared. "If Jacob wants to play this game in the open, then we shall meet him on the field of law." Ed tried to dissuade her. "The law in Silver Ridge belongs to whoever pays the most. Morrison is in Jacob's pocket." "Then we go above Morrison," Clara replied. "To the territorial authorities, to the federal marshals if necessary. Thomas taught me that paper and ink can be mightier than bullets when wielded correctly." They rode into town together, Ed and Clara on his surviving horse while Billy jogged alongside. The main street of Silver Ridge fell silent as they passed. Men stopped their conversations mid-sentence. Women pulled their children closer. Everyone had heard Clara Weston was dead and buried. Yet here she rode, very much alive. At the land office, Clara marched inside with her head held high. The clerk, a nervous man named Pemberton, nearly fainted when she announced herself. "I am Clara Weston, and I need to file an affidavit stating that I am alive and well," she said calmly. "I also need to send a telegram to the circuit judge in Laramie." Pemberton, his hands shook as he prepared the documents. But the records show," Sheriff Morrison said. "The records are in error," Clara stated. "As you can plainly see." While Pemberton fumbled with his papers, Ed kept watch at the window. A crowd was gathering outside, and he spotted several of Jacob's men pushing through. Time was running short. Clara signed the affidavit with a flourish and dictated her telegram. "Judge Samuel Hartwell, Laramie. Clara Weston alive. Attempted murder by Jacob Weston. Request immediate investigation. Property rights in dispute." Documentation follows. As they emerged from the office, Sheriff Morrison stood waiting with 4 deputies. His hand rested on his pistol. "Clara Weston is dead," he announced loudly. "This woman is clearly an imposter trying to steal from a grieving family." Clara met his gaze without flinching. "Then arrest me, Sheriff. Let us settle this in a court of law. I welcome the opportunity to tell my story under oath." Morrison, his jaw tightened. He had not expected her to call his bluff. An arrest would mean paperwork, witnesses, questions from higher authorities. Jacob had wanted this handled quietly. "You have made a grave mistake coming here," Morrison said finally. "Silver Ridge is no place for troublemakers." "Neither is it a place for murderers," Clara replied. "Yet here we both stand." 3 nights later, under a bone-white moon, the sound of approaching horses woke everyone in Ed's cabin. Clara was already at the window with a rifle when Ed joined her. Billy crouched by the back door, clutching the shotgun with white knuckles. 3 riders approached slowly, making no effort at concealment. The man in the center sat tall in his saddle, and even in the moonlight, Clara recognized Jacob Weston, this angular profile. He had come at last. "Come out, Clara," Jacob called, his voice carrying clearly in the still night air. "Let us discuss this like civilized people." Ed started to protest, but Clara placed a hand on his arm. "He will not shoot me here. Too many witnesses now. The telegram to Laramie has forced his hand." She stepped onto the porch, rifle held loosely but ready. Ed followed, his Colt visible in his belt. Jacob dismounted, keeping his hands away from his weapons. His 2 companions remained on horseback, watchful. "You should have stayed buried," Jacob said, removing his hat. In the moonlight, his resemblance to Thomas was striking, though his eyes held none of his brother's kindness. The golden horseshoe was meant to stay in the Weston family. Real Westons, not fortune-hunting outsiders. Your brother thought differently, Clara replied. He wanted the ranch run by someone who understood its value beyond mere profit. Someone who would protect the water rights for the community, not sell them to the highest bidder. Jacob's laugh was bitter. Noble sentiments from a woman who married a dying man for his money. I married Thomas because my uncle commanded it, Clara said steadily. I grew to respect him because he earned it, and I will honor his wishes because it is right. You have no idea what you are interfering with. Jacob stepped closer, and Ed's hand moved to his pistol. I have buyers lined up. Powerful men from back east who will pay fortunes for those water rights. Silver Ridge will become a proper town, not this dust-blown embarrassment. While the small ranchers die of thirst? Clara asked. While families who have worked this land for generations are driven out. Thomas would never forgive such betrayal. Jacob's composure cracked. Thomas is dead. His soft-hearted dreams died with him. Only the strong survive out here. And you are not strong enough to hold what you think is yours. We shall see, Clara said quietly. The law. I own the law in Silver Ridge. Jacob snarled. But perhaps you are right. Perhaps we should settle this properly. He smiled coldly. Meet me at the ranch tomorrow at noon. Bring your papers. We will discuss terms. Come alone, or do not come at all. With that, he mounted and rode away, his men following like shadows. Ed immediately protested. It is a trap. You cannot go. Clara watched the dust settle in the moonlight. Of course it is a trap. But he has made a mistake. He thinks I am alone. She turned to Ed and Billy. But I am not. Am I? Dawn came too soon, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. Clara had not slept, instead spending the night cleaning weapons and studying the hand-drawn map of the Golden Horseshoe that Thomas had kept in her jewelry box. Ed and Billy made their own preparations, grim-faced and determined. They left before the sun fully rose, but not for the ranch. Instead, Ed led them to an old line shack overlooking the main approach to the Golden Horseshoe. From there, they could see Jacob's trap spring without walking into it. Their caution proved wise. 5 riders were already positioned around the ranch house, hidden but visible from their elevated position. Jacob stood on the porch, checking his pocket watch impatiently. He never meant to negotiate, Ed muttered. Those men would have gunned you down the moment you appeared. Clara's jaw tightened. Then we spring the trap differently. They circled wide, approaching from the north where a dry wash provided cover. The morning sun was at their backs, blinding anyone looking their way. Clara had learned much from Thomas about tactical positioning. Billy stayed with the horses while Ed and Clara crept forward. They were within rifle range when one of Jacob's men spotted movement. His shout of alarm shattered the morning stillness. The battle erupted with shocking violence. Clara proved Thomas had taught her well, her rifle speaking with deadly accuracy. She dropped one man from his hiding spot behind the water trough. Ed's steady fire from her left kept 2 others pinned down. Jacob scrambled for cover, shouting orders. His remaining men tried to flank them, but the sun in their eyes and the superior position made them easy targets. Within minutes, 3 of the 5 gunmen were down. Enough, Jacob called out. Hold your fire. The shooting stopped, gun smoke drifting in the morning breeze. Clara could see Jacob crouched behind an overturned wagon, his fancy coat torn and dusty. You want to negotiate now? Clara called back, reloading. You have made your point, Jacob replied, real fear in his voice now. Take the ranch. Take it all. Just let me leave, Ed whispered urgently. Could be another trick. But Clara stood slowly, keeping her rifle trained on Jacob's position. You will leave the territory. Tonight, if I see you again, if you send anyone after us, I will finish what we started here. Jacob emerged, hands raised. His surviving men threw down their weapons. The great Jacob Weston, who had thought to build an empire on his brother's grave, was reduced to a frightened man begging for mercy. As they watched him ride away, Ed noticed movement on the eastern ridge. Riders were coming fast. Federal badges glinted in the morning sun. The federal marshals arrived with the morning sun at their backs, led by a grizzled veteran named Samuel Foster. Judge Hartwell and Laramie had received Clara's telegram and dispatched them immediately. The sight of wounded gunmen and Jacob Weston, his hasty retreat told its own story. Clara Weston? Marshal Foster dismounted, touching his hat brim respectfully. Judge Hartwell sent us to investigate claims of attempted murder and property theft. Appears we are just in time for the evidence. Clara lowered her rifle, exhaustion suddenly weighing on her shoulders. Marshal, I can explain everything. Over the next 3 days, the federal authorities unraveled Jacob's web of corruption. Sheriff Morrison had fled town during the night, his deputy's badges found scattered on his desk. The wounded gunmen, facing federal charges, quickly testified against their employer. Jacob Weston was arrested trying to board a train in Cheyenne. Among his possessions, the marshals found forged documents attempting to transfer the Golden Horseshoe's deed in evidence of bribes paid to local officials. His grand plans for selling water rights to Eastern syndicates crumbled like desert sand. The trial was swift. Clara testified with quiet dignity about the night she was poisoned, her voice never wavering as she faced Jacob across the courtroom. Ed and Billy corroborated her story, and even townspeople came forward, finally free to speak against the man who had terrorized them. Guilty of attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy, the judge announced. Jacob Weston would spend 20 years in federal prison, his dreams of empire reduced to a cell in Leavenworth. As spring arrived in Silver Ridge, changes swept through like fresh wind. The Golden Horseshoe Ranch was officially transferred to Clara's name. The water rights that Jacob had plotted to steal remained protected, ensuring the survival of smaller ranchers throughout the valley. Clara stood on the hill overlooking her land, Ed and Billy beside her. The ranch spread before them, green with spring grass fed by precious water. Thomas, his dream lived on through her courage. "What will you do now?" Ed asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Run this ranch as Thomas wanted," Clara replied. "Keep the water flowing for everyone who needs it. Build something lasting." She paused, then added softly, "But I cannot do it alone." Ed understood. After weeks of fighting beside her, he had found purpose beyond his lonely work with the dead. Billy whooped with joy, already imagining life on a real ranch. The corruption that had gripped Silver Ridge was broken. Justice, so rare in the frontier territories, had prevailed, and Clara Weston, who had been marked for death, would instead bring life to the desert lands. Spring of 1884 brought transformation to the Golden Horseshoe Ranch. Under Clara's management and Ed's steady hand, the neglected property bloomed like desert flowers after rain. Billy raced through the green pastures on a gentle mare Clara had given him, his laughter echoing across the valley for the first time in his young life. Clara proved herself a natural leader. She rehired the honest cowboys Jacob had dismissed, offering fair wages and respect. Word spread quickly that the Golden Horseshoe was hiring, and good men came seeking work. The ranch that had nearly become a symbol of greed became instead a beacon of hope. Ed discovered talents he never knew he possessed. Years of meticulous record-keeping at the funeral parlor translated well to ranch management. He tracked cattle, monitored water usage, and negotiated contracts with a precision that impressed even experienced ranchers. More importantly, he smiled now, the shadows of his lonely past fading like morning mist. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Clara made a decision that surprised no one but Ed himself. "I want to deed you 40 acres along the creek," she announced. "Not as payment, but as partnership. This ranch succeeded because we stood together. It should belong to both of us." Ed's weathered hands trembled slightly. "Clara, I cannot accept such a gift." What you did was save my life," Clara interrupted gently. "You chose righteousness over easy money. You gave me hope when I had none. That is worth more than 40 acres of land." Billy, eavesdropping from the doorway, could not contain himself. "Say yes, Mr. Ed. We can be a real family." The word hung in the evening air like a blessing. Family, not bound by blood but by choice, forged in danger and tempered by loyalty. Ed looked from Billy, his eager face, to Clara, his steady gaze, and felt something he had thought lost forever, belonging. "All right," he said quietly. "Partners?" They shook hands solemnly, but Billy's whoop of joy broke the formality. As the boy danced around the porch, Clara and Ed shared a look of understanding. What had grown between them was more than partnership, more than gratitude. It was the deep respect and affection that comes from facing death together and choosing life. The Golden Horseshoe Ranch prospered under their combined leadership. Water flowed freely to neighboring farms, cattle grew fat on good grass, and Silver Ridge itself began to thrive as corrupt influences fled and honest folk took their place. Sometimes Clara would stand where Thomas was buried, silently thanking him for his wisdom in protecting the land. She had honored his wishes, but more than that, she had found what neither of them had expected from their arranged marriage, a true home and a chosen family. On a clear morning in late spring, Ed Cartwright stood at the edge of Red Rock Canyon, staring at a small mound of earth marked with a wooden cross. This was the grave he had been paid to dig for Clara Weston, the grave that should have held a murdered woman but instead stood empty, a monument to deception. Clara stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Billy waited by the horses, understanding this moment belonged to the two people who had cheated death together. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the scent of sage and new beginnings. "Strange to think it all started here," Clara said softly. "This empty grave gave me a second life." Ed removed his hat, holding it over his heart. "I spent 20 years putting people in the ground, thinking I understood death. But that night when I found you breathing, I finally understood life. Its value, its fragility, its power to surprise us even in our darkest moments." Together, they began filling in the empty grave. Each shovelful of earth buried not a body, but the past. Ed's years of loneliness. Clara's brush with murder. The corruption that had nearly destroyed them all. When they finished, the mound looked like any other grave, but they knew better. This was not an ending but a transformation. Clara placed wildflowers on the fresh earth. "For the woman I was," she explained. "She died that night, in a way. But someone stronger was born." They returned to the Golden Horseshoe as the sun climbed high. The ranch sprawled before them, green and thriving. Cowboys tipped their hats as they passed. Children from neighboring farms played by the creek. And the great wheel of the main well turned steadily, bringing life-giving water to the surface. That evening, as they gathered for supper in the main house, Ed raised his glass of whiskey. To second chances, he toasted. To empty graves and full lives. To family, Billy added, grinning widely. To justice, Clara concluded, her eyes bright with unshed tears of gratitude. They drank, and the sunset through the windows blessed their table with golden light. Outside, the vast desert stretched endlessly, harsh and beautiful, dangerous and full of promise. But here, in this house built on truth and courage, they had carved out something precious. The Wild West was a land where law often bent to the will of the powerful, where might often made right. But sometimes, rarely, justice prevailed. Sometimes the good stood against the evil and won. Sometimes an empty grave became not a symbol of death but of resurrection, of life triumphant against all odds. And in Silver Ridge, where a woman once marked for death now lived freely, the water flowed clear and strong, nourishing all who came with honest need.